I'm an Immigrant Justice Corps fellow. This is a New York-based organization that pretty much places fellows or recent law school graduates and university graduates in different organizations in New York to give qualitative services or immigration legal services to vulnerable communities here in New York, upstate New York, and some parts of New Jersey. In a previous life, I worked with the International Refugee Assistance Project, or IRAP for short. They are currently leading the fight against Trump with the executive orders that he passed against immigrants. Oh, can you hear me? Okay, sorry about that. And I started the chapter at my law school back like 3 years ago. Okay, I don't really have a big migration story for myself, but I did have an office in Brooklyn, and last Friday we lost it from water damage. It was really bad, so I migrated to Manhattan. Unfortunately, for not so many people, it's not that easy to migrate. The process is much harder, and that's what I will be talking about today. So I will start out with the 1951 convention. After World War II, there were a lot of refugees from Europe, and the international community met together, and then they came up with the 1951 convention that defined the term refugee and what it means. And at that time, it was limited to certain geographic parts of the world, including Europe. And at that time, the definition was an applicant must, or a refugee must be unable or unwilling to return to his or her home country, or unable to or unwilling to avail him or herself of the protection of that government because of persecution on account, or well-founded fear of persecution on account of 5 things: race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. And the United States adopted that same definition and codified it in our laws. And you can see it today in the Immigration Nationality Act 101A, 42, and INA 207 and 208. You'll see the definition, refugee definition there, and what it means to be a refugee in the United States. The process to become a refugee while you're outside the United States is very arduous. It's very hard. It's a very long process. It's not as easy as people make it seem to be. And quite contrary to a lot of popular beliefs, the vetting process is exhausting, it's long, it's hard, and not a lot of people are able to go through it. So there are exclusion factors. There are reasons why a refugee might be denied entry into the United States. They are either persecutors of others. That was big during the 1950s. If you were a Nazi, for example, you were excluded. If you are able to resettle in another country, for example, if you were Syrian and you were able to move to Lebanon and get some kind of lawful status, that is considered firm resettlement. Therefore, you're not eligible to become a refugee. Or possibility of internal relocation, which means that in your country, if you are able to move to another safer area, you are not eligible to become a refugee. Obviously, there are credibility issues when you're doing the vetting process. If they think that you have credible, or I should say, if you have credibility issues and your stories and things don't match, they will deny you your refugee application. And then we have other inadmissibility factors, like fraud, material support to a terrorist organization, and this is a very big deal. In the United States, if you, let's say, are a poor old woman, let's say, and you lived in a house by yourself, and you were under the control of a local militia organization that is considered a terrorist organization worldwide, and they forced you to cook a meal for them, or to pay, let's say, $1 for protection. You are currently giving material support to a terrorist organization, and you're no longer allowed to come in. Additionally, we have failed security background checks. We'll see that a lot today, especially for Syrians and Iraqis, because a lot of them, they can't get background information on them. And you can, it's pretty understandable why a lot of them don't go through the vetting process or fail it. And then there are many others. You can check it in the INA, or the Immigration Nationality Act. This is a very small slide, but it's very dense because there are two types of refugees. You can be a refugee from outside the United States and an asylee inside the United States, but both people are defined under the refugee definition that we saw in the 1951 convention. I will not get into that because I want to talk about other things. The process is almost the same, but it's obviously harder for a refugee because they're not protected on U.S. ground versus an asylee who is already here. Okay, so this is the process. This is the fun process. When I used to work for IRAP, I was actually the director, and I had 13 teams, which means that we had 13 different cases of people from the refugee, mostly refugee countries like Syria, Kurdistan, Iraq, or the Kurdish region of Iraq. We have some Somalia, Yemen, and we started working with them at the point after they registered with the UNHCR. So, so the first process is the registration with the United Nations High Commission on Refugees office in the host country. So let's say you are Syrian, you are currently in Lebanon, you go to the local UNHCR office either in Beirut, Zahle, or Tripoli, and you register. You say, I'm here, I want to register as a refugee. After you do that, then there's a determination on whether you can be eligible for that status. And they go through the same definition that I mentioned in the beginning. And if you don't win on that level, you can appeal it. If you do get it, then they refer you to an international organization. There are many of them. There are plenty, more than I can even count. But most of some of the well-known ones are the International Rescue Committee, the Red Cross, International Organization of Migration. What they do is they help refugees through their if they needed help with local medical help or services, for education, help them money-wise. But as you know, there are so many refugees, there's a huge backlog, and oftentimes a lot of these refugees don't get the help they need. I remember there's one of the cases that I took, it was a man who is Palestinian, born in Iraq, had to flee Iraq to Syria. And then, if you can imagine, he's stateless, moved to a country that does not recognize nationality by birth, and then fled to a crisis area, and then had to bribe his way to Malaysia. He's married, has a son who is almost terminally ill, gets to Malaysia. He was accepted as a refugee and determined to be eligible for resettlement in the United States. And by the time I got to him, he had been waiting for 5 years. Why does that happen? Because when he gets through his vetting process or the security interviews, his family's waiting for, his wife and his child are also waiting for theirs. Once they get theirs, his has already expired. So they would have to wait for the whole process all over again. And this man can't work. The medical services that are provided for them are minuscule. His son has become suicidal. And if we tell USCIS or any of these organizations that his son is suicidal, he will be no longer eligible for resettlement. He would have to be stuck in Malaysia, and he can't do anything. And he has no documents because he's stateless. So that puts us in a very tough position. What do we do? How do we protect this man? Who do we talk to? Who do we fight to get this man the clearance that he needs to get on a plane? And this is the hardest part of our job, but it is like you cannot compare it to what they're going through. So, we fight with our mouth shut and our hearts open. And again, the cases that are approved for resettlement in the United States are the most vulnerable cases. We're talking mostly about women and children. It's very rare that you'll see men being resettled in the United States. And then finally, they have to go through another arduous security clearance with the host country's immigration offices that are placed in these countries. So for example, you'd see the USCIS office in, let's say, Malaysia, for example. So right here we saw 3 vetting processes that could take up to 3 to 5 years. Oftentimes, I don't know if you guys know Humans of New York. Yes? Okay. At some point they did Brendan, he made a photo series on refugees in Turkey, and one of the stories that went viral was Aya's story. And she is a Syrian who is living in Turkey, whose case was denied, and their reason was security reasons. They have no idea why. Later on, IRAP took the case, and later on I found out that their neighbor had possibly an issue with some militias. They have no idea. They don't know. And it could be denied on that simple reason. So what IRAP ended up doing is filing what is known as the request for review. So you have a denial. You tell them, please review this case again. Please give this woman a chance, or this family a chance to come, because they're not responsible for whatever crap that you're giving them. Excuse my French. Let's say it ends up being a good story, a happy story, and I have one happy story for you guys. Once they arrive in the United States, let's say in New York, there are resettlement agencies or organizations that take care of them, like Catholic Charities, International Rescue Committee, and they usually give them aid for about 3 months, just enough money to be able to eat, maybe pay some rent, and maybe some help trying to find jobs. But a lot of these people don't speak English. A lot of these people have trouble assimilating, they're traumatized. So 3 months, I mean, I can't watch a series in 3 months. You know, I can't imagine turning my life around in 3 months and, you know, understanding a whole culture and overcoming my trauma. And this is where we come in here in New York or in the U.S. This is where our volunteering becomes important, and this is what we do. We try to help these people, at least in the letting them first of all live in the communities that they already know, and then help them spread out and then move to different communities where they can assimilate. Okay, so one of the stories I worked on is of an Iraqi woman. I'll call her Hala. She was married and had 2 children. Her husband was cheating on her with the next door neighbor. She found out, the mistress's brother found out, and he wanted to get his own revenge on that lady, on Hala. So he comes to her house wanting to kill her. Who walks in? The husband. He sees him. He sees her. He assumes the worst. Kills him, beats her up, paralyzes half her body. They go to court. He says, I committed a crime of passion. They say, okay, that's cool. We'll give you 2 years. They said to her, well, your husband is accusing you of adultery. Can you say anything to that? She said, well, of course I didn't do anything. And then the sons turned up against her, and they testified against her, even though they had no idea, they were not witnesses. She got 4 years in jail. And after that, after she was released, she had to run away. She ran away to a women's organization, and then she was later transferred to Turkey. When we came to apply for her paperwork here, the United States did not want to admit her because they considered from an 1800 Supreme Court case that adultery is a crime involving moral turpitude. They did not want to let her in, and they considered that a charge of inadmissibility. So when we took on her case, we said, come on guys, there's a public interest case. We filed a waiver, it's called an INA 209C waiver, and we said, we have a public interest in violence against women, and this is a very old case. You can't hold her accountable for that, for something that she did not do. Finally, we won, and she was able to come here. So, yes, thank you.